Yesterday we got to celebrate 4 ordinations, including one of our very own, Joanne Grace Carroll. Our canon here was ordained to the priesthood. It was a wonderful day, cold but wonderful. I won't ever forget it, and I know she won't either. And I equally know that Jody's ministry at Grace Cathedral will continue to bless God and to bless us who benefit from her presence here. It's not a contest, but I did celebrate a similar milestone myself this past week, as Monday marked 19 years for me. And while I recognize that that is not a huge amount of time in the grand scheme of things, still, upon reflection, it's well more than that old standard of the 10,000 hours that Malcolm Gladwell made popular. You know, he said if you want to get good at something, you have to do it for at least 10,000 hours. But at any rate, I think the time that I put in has been enough to legitimately say that, yes, I have seen some things and even learned some things about calls and ministry and the priesthood. So I did find myself wondering this week, what exactly is it that I've learned? And I wondered if there might be a way to offer even a little bit of that to you all and to Jody, and so, well, here we are. To begin with a quick but I think instructive story. It's about perception and self-perception and why those things matter and maybe why they don't matter so much. I was once in an empty coffee shop in western Colorado. I was wearing my clerical collar and I was working on a laptop. 2 women came in and they ordered coffee. Now, one of them I recognized, but the other one I didn't. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw the second one point in my direction. "Who's that?" she said. "Oh, him," her friend replied. "That's our resident mythologist." And I wanted to say something, but I didn't. Instead, I just sat there and I could feel my ears getting red, how when someone's talking about you. And eventually I thought, you know what? I'm just going to take that feedback because I think I can use that. It was a helpful reminder to overhear strangers offhandedly discussing the concept of priesthood. See, to some, you're a pariah. You're a money changer in the temple. You're a chief of charlatans and scallywags, and you ought to be run out of town now, if possible. But to others, you're a bit of a benign enigma that they do not have a category for. What is that? So you become the resident mythologist, which I take to mean somehow, I don't know, maybe you're guarding something inscrutable but important for the rest of us. I mean, what are all these rituals? What is this bizarre commitment to ceaseless prayer? What is this incessant God talk that people speak as if their lives have been really changed by an encounter with something that cannot be photographed or measured or weighed? Called by what? A voice in the night? How sketchy is that? What do they even do up at that church anyway? What is this weird idea about being a wholesome example to other people? But maybe the truth is you're holding on to some kind of ancient fire. And it's your responsibility to never let it go out. Maybe you're a vital link on a chain, or at the very least, some kind of lore keeper. And they look at you and they wonder how it is that anything from so long ago and so far away could be that important to anyone. That you would lay down your life and go somewhere else and read a bunch of dusty books in an old, dark, quiet hall somewhere and take eternal vows and keep going back to the solitary workbench to craft your words over and over until every syllable is linked up right. So to some, you're Father Mackenzie from Eleanor Rigby. You're kindly, but deluded. To others, you challenge assumptions. You dredge up old memories, good and bad, just by your being there. Some will come right up and start to tell you why they haven't been in church lately. It happens a lot. To others, you are simply anathema. Sometimes you're just a stereotype. My point is, you don't know until you risk actual contact. And maybe have a chance to say and show why all this stuff is so important to you. Which is great, if it happens. Mostly, though, you never know what people have been through until you ask them. Which, suddenly, in your black shirt, you now feel the obligation to do. And even then, there's always another layer of the onion, another story to add depth to your understanding. The listening becomes the work, so much more than the telling. It's not an even give and take, but that's not the point. The big white collar of the religious professional is apparently a safe place onto which the world will project its deepest longings and fears and hopes and aspirations. You can't keep it from happening. You do it yourself if you weren't wearing one. But now you are. You're a living symbol. So how will you approach that task? And that tells us that we must learn to live with uncertainty. When I was 16 years old, I told the good folks at Emmanuel Baptist Church in Weatherford, Oklahoma, that I felt a call to ministry. And they all said the same thing. They said, "Yes, that is wonderful. You should do that. But only if you know that you can't do anything else." Well, it took me a little while to parse that language. I don't think they were talking about the levels of sacrifice involved or what my competency level would be. I think they were thinking about how hard it is to put everything else to the side and sit in the darkness with God and others, and quite often yourself. But now I would say, I understand what they meant. And that sounds hard, but it's a huge privilege. So much of everyday life is lived in the absence of clarity. People come to church, they're looking for answers. They leave church, they didn't get any answers. What happened? Clarity comes after the sentences and the paragraphs and between the chapters, in those rare moments where we get to breathe and look up. Real and absolute bedrock certitude is hard to come by. When we get it, we ought to rejoice over it. Yet where we live so much of our lives instead is actually in that space of paradox and pain and questions and confusion and unfinishedness. Sitting in the dark, as it were. So I don't want you to have any doubt about ministry. You do find God down in those cracks and crannies of paradox. You'll find God and you'll sing about it. But it's never comfortable. It's vulnerable and it's cold and the light is dim. But if it helps, you can know that Jesus has gone ahead of us into it. And some days that just has to be enough. As both a pastor and a leader, the job of the priest is to speak honestly and precisely to that experience as it pertains to both individuals and whole congregations, to give that experience words and a shape, to lead people of great faith down a new and sometimes uncertain path, to help them along without managing their anxieties for them, and to tell the truth about God as we have come to understand God, even when it's hard or humiliating. When you go through the process of consideration and discernment for holy orders, and there's many people in this room who've been through this process, people ask you to articulate the calling that you feel. They ask you again and again, in a few words, please tell us about this private conversation you've been having in your prayer life since you were a child. Okay. But I was game to try it. And I said, I feel called to go and be with the people of God during their significant life moments. That was the phrase that came to mind, significant life moments. And when it's appropriate, to point out a little something of God. Later on, I said, I feel called to be a bridge between the outcasts of the church and the church. In retrospect, that was all a bit grandiose. It was still far too much about me. It was not a call that accounted for the everyday pain and uncertainty of life. But experience kind of has a way of sanding down our edges, doesn't it? Now I just say, my mission is to be a healing presence, rain or shine. That seems right for now. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But when it doesn't happen, quite often the reason is me, right? It's my selfishness, my ego, my brain that likes to check out, my willingness and my unwillingness to be interrupted or inconvenienced for the sake of the gospel. I have learned that every so-called interruption can be an opportunity for Christ to come in. And I have learned how much I myself need to hear the daily absolution. There's a lot of missing the mark. So when the priest offers words about God's grace to others, she needs to remember to include herself. I resonate today with Samuel, who at first was afraid to share a vision of ministry with his mentor Eli. And I resonate with Nathaniel, who at first had nothing but sarcasm to offer, but who quickly relented and confessed Jesus and followed him. I know I have fallen short, and that I too am an incomplete sinner and a subject of God's redeeming love. When I stop and look behind me, there's a house of memories and stories. If I step way back and try to take it all in at once, I see altars and gravesides and marriages and baptisms and pastoral conversations and coffee cups and meetings and Bibles and words and trying to figure things out and praying. I was pretty sure, Jody, that I would love all this when I started it. And I have, but I've been surprised at times at how much I have loved it and how satisfied I feel in my deepest place. And that's what I want for you all. Everybody here today, whatsoever it is that you feel called to do in your life at this time, that it be good for the life of the world, yes. That it be a godly calling, absolutely. That you be transformed for Christ in the process of living it out, yes. But also that you be satisfied and happy. So celebrate with me today the sweetness of this life. God calls us each and all to a unique and lovely work, and we get to do it together. What a beautiful thing. Amen.